Good afternoon, one and all present here today. Chanakya has said, Sukhasya moolam dharmaha, dharmasya moolam arthaha, arthasya moolam rajayam. The basis of sukha or all pleasure is dharma or the righteous conduct. The basis of all dharma is artha or the wealth. The basis of artha is rajya or the state. It has been a long-standing debate on whether economics dictates the public policy or vice versa. Are the policies sympathetic to the economics today and the future? Or is it right to blame the policy when economics takes a bad turn? Or is it right to say when economics becomes a wild horse, it drags the policy by its will? What we know for sure is that the interplay of economics and public policy creates melodies written down on the sheets of history. The present pandemic situation is a momentous example of when every day we see them in dynamic equilibrium. As a management student aspiring to be the cogs of national development, we must learn to dance on these melodies. With this aim in mind, let's embark on the journey which we shall take to deep dive in the ocean of learning. Today, on the August occasion of the inauguration of Athena, the Economics and Public Policy SIG of IIM Nagpur, I'm enthralled to welcome our guest of honor, Dr. K.V. Subramanian, the Chief Economic Advisor of Government of India, our Director, Sir Dr. Bhimrao Mitri, our esteemed faculties, staff of IIM Nagpur, and my fellow students. Our guest of honor today needs no introduction. Dr. Subramanian is the youngest Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. He has also served as Associate Professor in the Finance domain at ISB Hyderabad. He's also serving member of the Board of Directors at Bandhan Bank and NIVM. Dr. Subramanian has worked in the expert committees of SEBI and RBI. He's an alumnus of IIT Kanpur, IIM Calcutta, Booth School of Business, Chicago. His research in the banking, finance, economic growth, and many other domains has been published in the world's leading journal. Sir, we are honored to have you as our chief guest. Now, sir, we at IIM Nagpur would like to present to you a living and breathing gift. Sir, a tree has been planted on your behalf at the Panna Tiger Reserve, Madhya Pradesh. We will be emailing you the certificate shortly.
Thank you.
So with your permission, I would like to unveil the logo of our newly formed SIG.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So this SIG was formed with the aim to strengthen the understanding of interrelations between business decision-making and economics in action. We believe that the interpretation of various global happenings and their cause-effect relationship in the economy is crucial for future leaders. This SIG is working under the mentorship of Professor Ankita Daj, faculty in the Economics and Social Sciences Department, IIM Nagpur. With this, I would like to request our Director, Sir Dr. Bhimrao Mitri, to please welcome our guest of honor.
Very good afternoon. Respected today Chief Guest, Subramanian Krishnamurthy ji, Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India. Sir, we are very happy to welcome you to IIM Nagpur, the youngest IIM, and you being a youngest Chief Economic Advisor, and also youngest alma mater of IIT Kanpur. I must say it is a great symbiosis, and future belongs to the young organization and young people and young nations, and I am sure. So I am Nagpur, and you are being inaugurating this very, very important subject, that Economic and Public Policy Club. I think this is going to go a long way, and welcome to IIM Nagpur, sir, once again. I'll just briefly talk about IIM Nagpur. IIM Nagpur is the basically started in the year 2014 as a 15th IIM in 13th biggest city of India. And the uniqueness of IIM Nagpur is located in the heart of the heartland, or Madhya Bharat ka Madhya Bindu, we always say Nagpur. And I am Nagpur, again, specialties. This is the one I am out of 20, which is located in the heart of the 80 and odd companies. That is called as a MIHAN. MIHAN is a multi-product special economic zone. It is the first of its kind in the country. And within that, Nagpur is located, and our left side, there is a Lupin, right side, there is a Ames and so many companies like Boeing spare part companies, and we have TCS, we have Tech Mahindra, L&T, and SCL Technologies, to name a few. So this is Nagpur already. The 5 batches have passed out, and currently our construction is in progress. And because of pandemic, the construction work, still some work is going on. Otherwise, June we would have moved to our new campus, but it is almost, hostels are ready. Some more work is small patch. The snag list and all work is going on in academic. Probably I am sure that before this year end, November or October, we may move to the new campus. It is 132 acres state-of-the-art campus, just 9 kilometers away from the Nagpur International Airport. And Nagpur currently has its flagship program, that is MBA program, 240 capacity. We have doubled the capacity, now 120 to 240. And we started this year, July, PhD program. And we are going to start, already announced the process is on, executive MBA for working professionals in Nagpur catchment area. We are going to start, and it is going to be operated from coming September. And at the same time, we are going to set up our campus in Pune, Bosri. CIRT, we have had our MOU very recently in presence of our Minister of Infrastructure and Transport. And there we are going to start our Pune campus executive MBA program, again about 60-70 capacity. Pune is one of the biggest industrial hub in the country. Pune, Jharkhand, Talegaon, and also IT hub. So we are going to start executive MBA there. And Nagpur already made MOU with National Institute of MSME. MSME is another focus area of Nagpur. So we have made MOU with NIMSME, that is located in Hyderabad, Gachibowli. So we have already made MOU, and Telangana doesn't have IIM, and we are going to set up our campus next year, and our executive MBA we are going to start from Hyderabad campus in the next year, and it is in our pipeline. Similarly, 24-25, Nagpur is aiming, as a part of its 5-year plan, we are going to start our campus in Singapore. So these are our plans for the spreading, one within the state, one outside the state, one outside the country. Just now I'm coming from National Education Policy after 1 year celebration, 29th Prime Minister inaugurated. Now the series are going on. My talk was there and multidisciplinary. So that already the process has started implementation. Before that, we want to set up our campus, one abroad, that is Singapore, Southeast Asia, that is our destination. And Nagpur also has INFED, Nagpur Foundation for Entrepreneurship Development. So INFED is the one, this is already recognized by Ministry of MSME and DST, as well as Niti Aayog. So we have started Women Entrepreneurship Program. I am Bangalore and I am Nagpur. These are the two I am focusing on, Women Entrepreneurship Programs. And NABARD also is going to fund us to build about 15,000 square feet area within our campus. And apart from that, Nagpur also set up some 8 centers of excellence. One is Indo-Japan Research Center. It is purely a cultural, and in India and Japan, a lot of types are there, and they are going to fund for Ahmedabad and Bangalore bullet train, and that is how, and also auto industry, a lot of types are there. We have set up that center. Apart from that, we have center for cyber security and data analytics. We have center for leadership development. We have center for corporate governance, CSR, and sustainability. We also have center for brand management. So these are the various, and the Center for Entrepreneurship Development. So these are the centers, multidisciplinary centers, keeping NEP in mind. We have started. Recently, we also opened up now the HSS, Humanities and Social Science Department is going to come. And we have strong tie-up with public sector companies and also some of the private sector companies like L&T and SCL Technologies and all we are working. And SCL Technologies, they are going to set up I am Nagpur SIG Technology Innovation Lab at our new campus so that the public sector problems, government problems, and private sector problems can be solved, and one mentorship from our faculty, one from senior person from SCL. So these are the some of the activities I am Nagpur does. And our students, I am Nagpur always attracts the bright students from more than 22, 23 countries every year. And we are normally about 20, this time 23% women population in our, the mix diversity is concerned at 22 states. And the first time till today, till last earlier batches only, since it is located in Maharashtra, majority of students used to be Maharashtra. First time UP has taken a lead. Maharashtra has become second, Andhra is third. So this is how now the population is changing according to geography. And I am Nagpur as 30 a faculty member who have reasonably good industry experience and they do cutting edge research. And many have very good publications and global exposure. And also some of them have, their exposure and experience in abroad. And apart from that, I am Nagpur attracted some of the senior faculty members, those who retired from Calcutta, I am Lucknow and Kojipur. They are going to be the adjunct professors at our campus. So this is how, this is the mix of faculty. And we also big way going into executive education. We already started online program and 9 programs we uploaded, 5 are already on, and another 5 are going, another 4 are going to come. And one program we did with the FedEx, Federal Express is fairly good in cyber security. We have tied up with FedEx Institute of Technology, Memphis, Memphis University Business School for the international program on cyber security and data analytics. Since all businesses are platform based, so that program is the first of its kind in the country. We are going to start in coming October. So this is a brief about I am Nagpur. And once again, sir, first of all, thank you very much for sparing your time. In spite of busy schedule, I know that minute to minute, it was a very tight schedule, and in spite of that, you have made it, and you are going to inaugurate this important club of our students, and it is going to be always remembered. And again, as I told you, future belongs to the young companies and young institutions and young leaders. And you being a young leader, we are very happy to be welcome you. And again, we are eagerly looking for your address. With this, once again, thank you very much for you and Economics Club, all the student body for considering, it is a student's choice. They have decided in 1 minute, our chief guest has to be Subramanian Saab. So, sir, thank you very much for coming once again. And now it is the student body. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your words. Dr. Subramanian, sir, I would request you to take the stage now.
Very good afternoon, Professor Maitri, Director IIM Nagpur, Professor Ankita Dash, Dimpy, and all the other students. First, let me acknowledge that Dimpy, your introduction was among the best that I've heard. And I really enjoyed, especially the quote from Arthashastra with the correct explanation as well. So I really enjoyed it. I'm not given to empty praise. And so when I do praise, I mean every word of it. And so, my students at ISB, for instance, I was known as the professor for tough love. We would teach them the hardest course on campus, make the students work the hardest. And, if students got an A in my class, that was a badge that they could actually display. So just telling you that, you know, I mean the praise that I'm giving. And so really enjoyed your, you know, introduction to the club. Given that this is the first, you know, it's the inauguration, let me, in the spirit of actually and carrying over the wonderful start that Dimpy gave, let me recite a shloka to Lord Ganesha and also a Ganesha Vandana, so that Lord Ganesha, who's the Vigna Harta, and you know, his grace is there on the you know, on the Economics and Public Policy Club. अजं निर्विकल्पं निराकारमेकम् अजं निर्विकल्पं निराकारमेकम् निरानन्दमानन्दमद्वैतपूर्णं परं निर्गुणं निर्विशेषं निरीहम् परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेम परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेम परब्रह्मरूपं गणेशं भजेम. गणानां त्वा गणपतिगुं हवामहे कविं कवीनाम् उपमश्रवस्तमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पत आनश्चिन्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनम्. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. May Lord Vigneshwara's blessings be there on IIM Nagpur and also on the Economics and Public Policy Club. Lord Vigneshwara is also known as the Lord of Knowledge, and so I hope that his blessings continue to be there on the club. It's an excellent initiative. Let me first congratulate the students for starting this initiative. I will try and keep my remarks brief. We can have a you know, discussion on the economy, etc., which many of you would want to hear you know, during the question and answer session. But in my you know, in my enormous privilege as having the opportunity to inaugurate this club, let me just share a few thoughts about what should be the objectives of such a club, and especially the on the research side and on the teaching side as well. Let me first talk on research side. The director mentioned about you know, publications. Given that you are starting out, you're a young organization. One of the advantages of being young is that the idealism still stays with you. You know, oftentimes ravages of age and ravages of time make one quote unquote practical, a word that I thoroughly dislike, because I've always believed that nobody ever brought revolutionary change by being practical. It is always the idealists, you know, those who have passion, who can think beyond practical, who are the ones that bring revolutionary change. So the first piece of advice that I want to give to all the students, you know, of this club, when you go and work, avoid this word practical like plague. That's the first piece of advice that I would give you. You know, whenever you hear that word, it's, you know, usually a case of somebody trying to maintain status quo, and the person who you know, typically defends status quo is someone who is benefiting from that status quo, and so there is most likely some vested interest involved as well. You know, I mean, this is of course In general, I'm saying there may be exceptions, but most likely that is the case. So try to avoid being called practical. And if you are called practical, take that as something, as a signal. If you ever remember the words that you heard at the inauguration of this club, do remember that that's a call for you to change. When you hear the word practical, maybe you should remember that somebody is telling you that you've started compromising too much, and that you have stopped keeping those ideals that made you who you were in your 20s. And that's something, and by the way, a simple tip that I would give you: write down your goals before you leave IIM Nagpur, and keep that with you, always with you, because it's likely that ravages of time may actually make you move away from your ideals, but that should not be the case. Relatedly, actually, I'll say, and I say this with as someone who is from the same system, the IIM system, do not treat the IIMs as a recruitment agency. Do not treat the IIMs as a recruitment agency. I'll share that when we had this practice at IIM Calcutta, where after you got your job, they used to interview you, ask you for tips, so that the junior batch could listen to those videos and learn from it for their own placement preparation. And one of the first things that I said in my video was, and actually, I don't think it was something that was necessarily liked by everyone, but that's been who I have been. I say what I think is right.
Dr. Subramanian.
Looks like the digital media also did not like advice. Well, it's the unenviable job of someone who's called to inaugurate a forum to give some advice. That as the platform stopped, I was reminded that somebody wise said, "Don't ever give salt or advice without being asked." But I will reckon that, given that I was invited to come and open this club, I have been asked to give advice, and so I'll take that cue, despite the protest from the digital platform on advice. So the first piece of advice that I used to give my students, and I hope you will remember, is if your only goal in life is to be rich, it shows an extreme poverty of ambition. If your only goal in life is to be rich, it shows an extreme poverty of ambition. Come on, you guys need to be more ambitious than just, oh, mujhe gaadi kharidni hai, mujhe badi banana hai, gaadi, and if that is all you want in life, please be a little bit more ambitious. You should have a little bit more. And let me tell you, compared to the 99.9% of the population who actually does not have the privilege of studying in the IIMs, you all will be rich for sure. There is no question about it. The question that you must ask is, who are you going to keep your reference point? 20 years later, 30 years later, someone among you will actually be a little richer than others. But is that what, I want to be richer than the richest person actually in my batch? Or, do you want to take the benchmarks that I'm actually so much more fortunate than 99.9% of this country's population, and therefore I need to return back return back something to this 99.9% population? That's the question that you need to ask yourself. So the first piece of advice, or more appropriately a humble request to all the students, is not to treat IIMs as a recruitment agency related to that. Therefore, don't keep your only goal in life as being rich. And let me tell you, actually, I say this with experience, as a business school professor, it's not as if you're ever actually starved of money. So I can tell you that, once you make money, then you start, you will realize that there's a lot more to life than just money. And so, money is necessary, but not sufficient. Just keep that distinction in mind. Learn to distinguish between what is necessary and what is sufficient. Beyond a certain threshold, money is just some additional zeros in a bank account, which, there is this saying, in the United States, when people move from one place to another, they typically move on their own. They buy or they rent a U-Haul. A U-Haul is basically, is like a small truck to carry things. There's this saying that there is never a U-Haul behind a hearse. When somebody is having their last journey, there is no U-Haul at the end of it. And if you remember that perspective, that you cannot take anything, that you make in this world, with you. If you keep that perspective, you'll always remember that there's a lot more to life than just, wanting to be rich. So that's the first, objective that I want to leave you, especially in an IIM. Especially in an IIM, because, this is one place where somehow the objective oftentimes becomes an overriding one of becoming wealthy, becoming rich. And I say that from experience. So, I would therefore say that have a bigger objective, that, try and contribute to society. I think that is something, and you could do that by being an entrepreneur. If you are an entrepreneur who brings change in some way, ideally with consumers that are at the, that are common people, then I think you would have made a difference. It's not as if you have to necessarily go into academia, or you have to go into social work or public policy either to actually make a contribution. You can make a contribution by being an entrepreneur, just in the fact that you actually will create so many jobs. If you're an entrepreneur, you will provide jobs for so many. So that is also, a definite possibility. So that's my first request. Second, I want to, at least those that are part of economic and public policy, one of the most important skills in, when you go and work in the corporate world, is the ability to think from first principles. There is no substitute for this. While, I learned this ability to think from first principles during my JEE preparation, that's not the only way in which you can pick up, thinking from first principles. This habit of actually deriving everything mathematically, understanding where it comes from, is something that those of us who, had to prepare for the JEE actually picked up, but that's not the only way. You can pick it up, in other ways as well. But the ability to be able to think from first principles is something that is very important. It's in other words, actually learning to learn is a very important skill. If you just use if you use theory without understanding the origins of the theory, then you will find yourself actually out of depth at some point in time, when a new environment will come. For instance, take the COVID crisis, once in a century event. Really not that much of a template at all. Unlike other crises, which were primarily economic in nature, those that all of us who are living here, none of us has seen a economic crisis that has come from a pandemic. So you had to go back to first principles to actually be able to think through what is the how to think about measures to take. So I think that's the second piece of advice I would give you professionally, which is keep the habit of thinking, and especially thinking from first principles. Keep that alive. To my students, actually, when I would teach at ISB, as in any other MBA institution, there are typically you have the quants and you also have the poets. You have both, a mix of both of them. Typically, the quants will think that rigorous thinking or thinking from first principles is just throwing a lot of math. Which is quite the opposite. You can actually do a lot of math and yet be very non-rigorous in your thinking. And at the same time, some of the poets basically will think that, oh, just being able to havabaji karna is basically what that's not either the rigorous thinking. So rigorous thinking is like peeling the layers of an onion. You peel one, you ask the first why, the next peel comes, you answer that next why, second why, then the third peel comes. That's how rigorous thinking really evolves. If you've been able to answer 3-4 levels of why, you will definitely be able to defend your thesis to any intelligent audience. So that's you can also think about another metaphor for this is actually like playing chess. If you're only thinking one move ahead, then you're quite likely to lose. But if you're able to think 3 moves ahead, even if 3 moves ahead, that's a pretty decent chess player, who can think 3 moves, at least calculate 3 moves. That's the second piece of advice that I would give you. Third, relating to research itself, and this is a lot for the faculty who will be associated with the club. But at the same time, given that I have the audience of the director, so I'm going to utilize that opportunity to the benchmarks for publications, especially given that Nagpur is a young institution and therefore doesn't have any legacy issues. Benchmarks should be set high enough. And let me mention it right away. I wouldn't bother about any of the journals that are actually published in India. They as faculty, you have to put in almost similar effort if you have to publish something in in India or even in Asia. The benchmarks have to be some leading journals, most of them in the United States, and some in Europe, not all of them. Those have to be the journals that have to be aspired for. And from the faculty's perspective, I can tell you, as having done this, the amount of effort that it takes to actually publish a paper for the Journal of Finance or a review of financial studies, the effort is similar to publishing in a Journal of Financial Intermediation. Journal of Financial Intermediation is actually next level. It's not one of the top 3, but the effort is almost the same. From there, you can carry over. Therefore, if you want to publish in Journal of Empirical Finance, for instance, compared to publishing in Journal of Financial Intermediation, the effort is almost the same. But the visibility you get from publishing a paper in a review of financial studies is much higher, or a Journal of Finance, or a Journal of Financial Economics, or a Journal of Law and Economics, much higher than publishing. So don't pursue this publication game कि मेरे लिए एक और publication हो गया, counting or bean counting जो करते हैं. Actually, don't do that. If you will basically get some quantity, but the quality aspect will be missing. And more importantly, when you ask yourself, when you look at the mirror, you will actually not necessarily be happy with with what you see. So from the perspective of the management, I would say, provide the necessary resources, especially data sets, the funding to be able to attend conferences, provide them the fees to sort of submit to journals, because many of these journals charge $100 or $150 odd. Provide them the resources, but expect high standards. Unless you set high standards, you're not going to get adequate. So that's again, as I said, the limitations and all these things are always come from oh, is this practical? So I would, there in that context, I would remind you my first advice, even to the senior management, do remember that the word practical is actually by far the biggest enemy to excellence. So that's and finally, I want to for the benefit of students in particular, the advice I want to leave you with is, especially given the pandemic, I think the importance of health, family have really been highlighted, enormously. So, the metaphor that I think about is, think about yourself as a juggler. We all are jugglers in real life. We are juggling among our career, family. Then you'll actually have parents, friends. You're juggling with a bunch of things. So a juggler juggles with balls, right? But there are some glass balls which, even if you actually lose sight of those glass balls, they'll fall to the ground. They'll bounce back. You can pick them up. But there's one glass ball which you are juggling with, which is your family and your health. Maybe to think about it as two glass balls: your family and your health. If you actually take your sight out of that glass ball, it will fall to the ground and shatter to pieces. Unlike the rubber balls, you cannot pick them up. And you will only be picking up the pieces literally and figuratively in your life. So there are two glass balls, which is your health and your family, which make sure that those are glass balls that you don't take your eyes off. And I can tell you that I've not become a 70-year-old yet, but I can tell you that when a person is 70-year-old, no person actually feels any satisfaction from having earned money or just basically achieved much in career. They look at their family at that time. You basically want to care about your health, and your family is what matters. And as in chess, end game matters. End game always matters. In life as well, end game matters. And so those that can plan their game by being able to project the end game are those that are, I think, will basically be happy. So pursue happiness. Let me with the wish that IIM Nagpur itself should be 100-year-old, very, very powerful institution, and of that, the Economic and Public Policy club should be a 100-year-old club. With that, let me end with this wonderful prayer that comes in our Vedas. Shatamanam bhavati shatayuh purusha shatendriya ayushevendriye pratitishthati. With immense gratitude, I would thank you all for providing me the opportunity to inaugurate this club, and wish you all good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So your words of wisdom will always be the guiding light to IIM Nagpur and our club. So now, with your permission, may I open the floor for the questions?
Sure.
Okay, sir. Students, whosoever is having questions, please raise your hand. Ankita ma'am, I leave it to you.
Yes, sure. So we already have quite a few actually eager questions from students beforehand, but I think there are a few who wanted to ask it live to you, sir. Yes, Sai, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir, for the insightful session. So my question is, as the principal author of Economic Survey 2018 and 19, you mentioned that survey is imbibed by the spirit of unfettered blue sky thinking. Can you please shed some light on the unfettered blue sky thinking process, and what effect will network marketing have on ethical wealth creation? Can it be considered a positive thing or a negative thing?
You've asked two questions, one which is a broad one, another is a far more specific one. So, by the way, those are not two surveys. The 2018-19, this is so financial year 2018-19 was the survey where we actually used unfettered thinking. See, I'll give you one example of this unfettered thinking. And this is maybe the engineer who turned into an economist who actually, wrote this. I did derive the inspiration from my engineering training. If you look at economics in particular, and this is true certainly for economics, there is this fascination with the concept of an equilibrium in economics. I'm sure you learn this, in microeconomics and macroeconomics as well. When you go and look at the macroeconomies, though, and when we so just take a step back, and I'll complete that idea of unfettered thinking. But just let me take a small digression. When we sat down to write this economic survey, what we wanted to do was we wanted to lay out the strategy for India to progress very fast, develop very fast. And what we did was we basically first thing went and looked at each of the countries over the last 1 century, countries that grew at least 5% in real terms, and not just for a few years, but for a full decade. So 5% in real terms at least, but for a full decade, not just for a few years. So that's what we basically went. And so we wanted to indulge in unfettered thinking on, looking at what is it that leads to such enduring growth, such long periods of growth. And when we went and looked at at these countries, what we found was that none of these countries actually fits the concept of an equilibrium. For instance, what you actually see is as the GDP per capita of a country increases, it typically invests even more into investment. So, if there was a concept of equilibrium, there would be an optimal level of investment that the country does. That is what an equilibrium is. There is a, but there was no equilibrium. If anything, you actually find what we, in economics call supermodularity or submodularity. Supermodularity is where the second derivative of, so del 2y by del x1, del x2 is greater than 0. That's supermodularity. In other words, the marginal itself increases, marginal y with respect to x1 increases when x2 increases. That's a supermodularity. Submodularity is when del 2y by del x1, del x2 is less than 0. Second derivative is negative. So, in equilibrium though, you would actually find that del 2y by del x1, del x2 is equal to 0. That's what, so what we found is it's as if economics, think about, a sculptor and the economic profession as that sculptor creates a beautiful sculpture, very elegant, very beautiful sculpture. That sculpture is the concept of equilibrium. Falls in love with that sculpture because it's so elegant, so beautiful. In the process, forgets that sculpture is basically does not have any life of its own. It is only a sculpture which actually is not, that's not reality. There is no life in it. So that's how the economic profession, in my opinion, actually, having of course learned all the literature in macro, micro, etc. This is what we sort of one of the key ideas, and that's to me is an example of basically of unfettered thinking. Not getting constrained or bound by what the economic profession has talked about over the last 60, 70 years, but instead borrowing from some other profession, engineering for instance, say, look, this does not seem to make sense. That's what we actually ended up doing, and thereby we coined this term called virtuous cycle, starting from private investment. And that's how it came about. That came about because of the unfettered thinking. Your question about digital networks and their impact on ethical wealth creation. See, you've asked a very, very specific, narrow question. Overall ethical wealth creation requires the marriage of the invisible hand of markets with the hand of ethics or trust. And I'm sure you I don't know whether you've had courses on economics of information, where incentive contracts, incomplete contracts, etc. are taught. I don't know whether those of you, maybe second year students, some may have taken an elective like that. So if you go back to Holmstrom, Nobel laureate, his Nobel Prize winning paper 1979, that paper talks about incentive contracts and saying, so basically says, when you want to design an incentive contract, the trade-off is between giving incentives to the agent, a principal agent problem, but at the same time when you give everything, if the entire payoff to the agent is basically variable payoff, but then the agent takes a lot of risk. If on the other hand you give only a fixed payoff, then the agent basically takes no risk but has no incentive to work hard either. So there's this trade-off. And then there's a lot of literature on incentive compensation, etc. Recently, the 2017 Nobel Prize was given to work on incomplete contracts. So this entire Holmstrom and incentive contracting literature was on complete contracting, incomplete contracts. But the problem actually in the real world is that neither incentives nor these institutions actually provide you full incentive to be ethical in your behavior. That is something that economic systems have still not figured out a way to really create ethical behavior. Economic systems have created a way to actually incentivize legal behavior, but what is legal may not necessarily be ethical. And what you need for wealth creation is basically the marriage of the invisible hand of markets with the hand of ethics. So that's the point that I actually, so it's a much broader aspect, and that's where, India's historical, and as we covered in the 2020 economics survey, 2019-20, up until 1750 AD, India accounted for more than 1/3 of world's GDP. And this is not an Indian saying it, but Angus Madison showing in his research. And that was done because of this combination of, of trade, invisible hand of markets. We didn't use that terminology, but in spirit, that is what it was, with basically ethics. And that's what led to such kind of, prosperity.
Thank you very much, sir.
Nikhil, would you like to ask a question now quickly?
Yes, ma'am. Sir, thanks a lot for taking your valuable time. Sir, my question is like for more than a year, companies are going online, like they are giving work from home for the employees. And by this, employees are spending less amount and their speculative cashes are increasing and they are saving more. So if this continues, it may become a harm to the economy. So people will be spending less. So the interest rates may reduce and eventually it will lead up to a crash in the economy. And do you think it hampers the dream of becoming a 5 trillion economy for India?
So, Nikhil, let me use your question as an illustration for what I mentioned earlier about rigorous thinking. This is the kind of statement where there are lots of leaps of faith that are being made. A decline in savings means a crash in the economy. Not sure. Similarly, even whether or not actually online activities necessarily will lead to a decline in the savings, again, not clear. So I think, and Nikhil, I'm not, my intention is not to pick on you, but to illustrate using this question that you will see in a lot of commentary. Somebody who's not an MBA student from a top IIM, actually I will allow them to to make statements like this, but not with students like you. You have to be far more rigorous in your statements. The thesis that you are mentioning, actually there's a lot of assumptions you're making, which is what you have to be very careful about. Among, let's say, many different scenarios, and I'm using statistics, maybe with a 0.01% probability, what you're talking about may manifest. But do you want to actually take a hypothesis is not one which actually holds true with 0.01% probability, at the very least, and I'm sure you've learned hypothesis testing, you want actually the hypothesis to hold with at least 95% probability. So this is something which conceptually, though, the problem, there are lots of, just this question, if I were, teaching a class, I would actually teach for 1 hour, pick up each part of your question, each of the elements and say, this is all the things from X to Y. These are the things that actually, which are involved. And if all these manifest, then you're from, online work to basically increase in savings. First link. From increase in savings to actually decline in interest rate. Second link, from second X to Y. From decrease in interest rate to crash of economy. And give you just one example. In the decrease in interest rates can actually increase investment in the economy as well. So there's a big leap of faith in saying that decrease in interest rates will actually lead to a crash of the economy. So I hope you've actually gotten what I'm trying to say. It's that you have to be far more careful in actually the thesis that you make. And again, let me say it mathematically. In each of these, think about the output as basically a function of x1, x2, x3, x4 up to xn. That is basically, it's not just, so the way you stated, you said, digital economy leading to actually higher savings. So you said it as if, if the savings rate is just a function of the, of online work. There are lots of other variables. Similarly, when you go from savings rate to interest rates. Again, it's a multiple variable function. Again, from interest rate to the macroeconomy itself. So you have to be far more careful in the kind of thesis that you put out.
Hope that answers your query, Nikhil. Musfera, would you like to go ahead with your question? I'm sorry, Musfera, we can't hear you. Okay, in the interest of time, Shubhangi, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful session. So my question is, as a B school student, we have always learned that transforming organization structure every few years is how the companies adapt to their circumstances. So instead of privatization of PSUs, is it a better decision to change the organization structure like the current amenities, or just make a hybrid model for both private and public enterprise where profit maximization is one of the incentives?
Very good question, Shubhangi. I must say, actually, I'm glad that you've related what you've learned in your in the MBA program with a very important policy push of the government. So you are partially right, not fully right. The part that you are actually right on is on that given certain objectives for the organization, a dynamic organization is one which actually changes its organization structure to try and achieve those objectives, right? That's that's what I'm sure you've learned in your organization theory. But when there is a problem with the objectives itself, if the objective, laying out the objectives itself is a problem, and for instance, and I'm sure you've learned in organization theory as well, that you need to incentivize the employees. You need to actually ensure that the employees have the right motivation to actually work hard, so there are different aspects now. And there's again an aspect where we can talk more at length. The big difference you see is, take for instance public sector banks versus private sector banks, just as an example. And we showed in the 2020 economic survey, look at over 50 years the performance of the public sector banks versus the private sector banks. Not only comparing averages, but if you take the take the worst performing public sector bank, compare it to the best performing private sector bank, or vice versa, take the best performing public sector bank, compare it to the worst performing private sector bank, we showed even in terms of the distribution that there are systematic patterns that have persisted. And the economic reason for that is because incentives, information, and objective function, these three actually change with organizational form, especially nature of ownership. There's a lot of work on this, which has shown, I've myself done some research work on this as well, that because the incentives can be far more high powered in a private sector organization, the motivation is oftentimes much higher. And there's a lot of evidence we've shown as well. The chapter that we wrote on privatization and wealth creation clearly illustrates that, let's take the example of Air India, for instance, right? When it was transferred into the government of India by the Tatas, was a vibrant, and one of the leading airlines at that time. We've seen how periods over time, so much basically deterioration has happened. And now almost 25,000 crores of your money, my money, and other taxpayers' money has to basically go in just to keep Air India alive. Now, that 25,000 crores can actually go and create so many hospitals, in the hinterland. That 25,000 crore that is going into, to keeping Air India afloat, alive, can be, you can use that to create health infrastructure. So the basic point is that the taxpayers' money, where do you want to go and invest that best? and this, I'm sure you are, as MBA students, you understand the concept of opportunity cost, that when that 1 rupee of taxpayer money is put in public sector, if you go and put that actually in, let's say, healthcare, education, things that are, activities, public goods that must be created. And this is, I'm sure you've learned again in economics as well, that government should be in areas where there are market failures. In other words, where basically public goods have to be created. But when there is no market failure, I'm sure you've learned, market failures. If there is no market failure, then it's best to actually let the private sector do that economic activity. And, if you take the example of Air India, you take the example of Bharat Petroleum, what is the market failure there? You actually have a Jet Airways, you had a Jet Airways, you have actually other airlines like Indigo today, those who actually are performing. So what is the economic justification for government to be running these, actually, with all the attendant inefficiencies, is actually the basic question that we have to ask. And that question we asked, and the clear answer to that is that, it creates far more inefficiencies, and taxpayers' money is actually, there's an opportunity cost. That 25,000 crores that have actually been, or as taxpayers has been invested last 10 years, if suppose, just as a thought experiment, if Air India had been privatized 10 years back, the money that was basically being, poured in to keep the Air India, pay the pilots at, let's say, higher wages, whatever it is, if that had been kept, poured into healthcare, our healthcare infrastructure would have been far, far better today. We would have created so much more hospitals. So that's the way we have to think about it. Keep the fact that there is a budget constraint even for the government, and that there is an opportunity cost. That the taxpayers' money has to be invested in in those projects that have the maximum ROI, return on investment. And when I say return on investment, I'm not saying it in a commercial sense, taking into account the social good, therefore the good for the economy itself. That's the answer to, I think, an excellent question.
Yeah, so we have a couple of corollary questions on this. People are asking, is reprivatizing banks. So we had this nationalization of banks way back in 69 to 71, right? So we are sort of again reversing it with, privatizing certain huge public sector banks. So is this the economic rationale behind it?
Very much, very much, very much. In fact, let me, let me point out, in 1969, if you compared the debt to GDP, private credit to GDP ratio, okay, which is basically an example of penetration of the banking sector.
Right.
India and Malaysia were almost at the same level. If anything, Malaysia was a little behind us in 1969. 50 years later, look at the private credit to GDP ratio for India and Malaysia. India is at 58%. I don't remember exact numbers, but I about a year back or so. Malaysia is at multiples. And take, for instance, take the OECD average. OECD average is basically 158%. If you take India as the 5th largest economy, how many banks do we have in the global top 100? We have one bank, which is a lowly ranked SBI at the 55th rank. Countries that are 1/6 our size, 1/8 our size, have 1 or 2 banks, even in the global top 20. So I mean, you go and read that chapter that on the golden jubilee of bank nationalization. Indicator after indicator, basically plethora of evidence to show how much of a lost opportunity we had from possibly the most damaging policy, that was done, which was nationalization of the banks. Then it was supposed to actually increase credit penetration, but today, even today, almost 75 years after independence, in sections of the country, Northeast, for instance, the credit penetration is similar to sub-Saharan Africa levels, in sub-Saharan Africa, in terms of private. So that's what basically we've gotten. So clearly, absolutely, a very good illustration of the inefficiencies that are created.
Right. So Saurabh, would you like to ask the next question?
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Namaste, sir. Thank you for your valuable time. My question is, RBI has the mandate to keep inflation in the target band of 2 to 6%, but they generally and we generally use headline inflation to measure that 2 to 6%. So why don't we change the policy to target the core inflation, because it excludes the fuel and food products prices, which eventually is not in the control of even the Monetary Policy Committee?
That's a very good thought. I would, there's a very rich debate that happened on this. Go and read the Urjit Patel committee report. Before the monetary policy framework was implemented, the then deputy governor Urjit Patel was asked by the then governor Dr. Raghuram Rajan to head a committee to look at the and there is a good debate on this, in that report. Go and read that. This is a question that we can discuss for the next half an hour or so, but I would suggest, I think the best resource is that report.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So Naveen, would you like to go next?
Very good afternoon, Dr. Subramanian. My question, am I audible? I'll just confirm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my question pertains to a very hot topic that we have. So India's sovereign credit rating, despite indicators like zero default or the highest forest reserve, has been consistently low, BBB minus, which is a big impediment in the FPI inflows. It does not affect our macroeconomic indicators in the long term. But how can India overcome this the obstacle of apparent global rating bias that is there? Is there a way out?
It's simple. You all actually read that chapter that I'm sure you're referring from the chapter, this year's economic survey chapter, where the title itself tells basically the main thesis. Do India's fundamentals reflect its credit ratings? No. So all of you actually, go and talk about it when you go and you'll go and work in the private sector. Again, plethora of indicators that clearly show that India's ratings do not reflect its fundamentals. I am absolutely clear, and as somebody who's actually done research in financial economics, who understands this area really very well, to me, it's absolutely clear that India's, credit rating does not reflect its fundamentals at all. And the first chart that we show there, the fifth largest economy in the world has never been rated so low. And it's a simple conceptual point that the rating is basically a reflection of the ability to repay effectively and the willingness to repay. And the ability to repay is the overall GDP of the economy, because that's what you use to repay, because overall GDP is a measure of the economic activities that have happened in that particular year. It is out of that you actually pay back your loans. That is why we look at the credit to GDP ratio, for instance, right? We don't look at overall credit divided by GDP per capita. We look at overall credit divided by GDP, and that's because we want to look at how much activities is being generated and to repay. But the credit rating agencies use GDP per capita as actually a big determinant of credit ratings, and that's historical because before the global financial crisis, it's the most of the advanced economies. They were the ones that had higher ratings, and so in order to fit that, they had to use GDP per capita in a regression. Now, and that model, which has GDP per capita actually as a big determinant, that model has still not changed. And that is why, and we keep getting the rating that we have, which basically is conceptually flawed. So, simple, all of you go, learn about this and talk about it and write about it and, make when you go and especially work in international organizations, show them the stuff. There is, we've basically written a very, very well-researched chapter there and, bring it to the attention. I do my part whenever I, interact with the rating agencies, which we do very often here. I actually keep reminding them about, what we think about their methodology.
Sir, there are a lot of hands going up. So do we have time for about 2 or 3 more questions?
Yeah, go ahead. The good thing is I actually I finished that meeting, so I have some.
Okay, that's great. So Musfera, are you ready and connected
yes,
now? Yeah, please.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for this
Yeah.
inspiring session. It's been extremely inspiring for me. So my question is, sir, unlike several advanced economies, in India, it is seen that inequality and growth somehow converge in terms of the effects on several socio-economic factors that we consider instead of conflicting. So why is this so for us?
Musafra, Musfera or Musafra? Musfera.
So Musfera.
By the way, just a nice name. What does the name mean?
So it means bright. So it's an Arabic. It means bright.
Yeah. Well, this can be said for all the questions that have been asked. All very bright students. But given that you've asked, I must say your question befits your name. So you're clearly, saying it from the economic survey chapter. I think on the inequality versus growth. Is it conflict or convergence? Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the reasons for that are also there in that chapter. So do you want me to go through the full chapter, or maybe I'll just give you
all of them have been highly influenced by the economic survey, if I may say so. Because I remember reading this about. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just give you that's a short 2-minute gist. Basically, see, there are, and having observed carefully, a lot of commentary often on India is driven very much by patterns that prevail in the advanced economies. I'll give you an example. India has a very large informal sector. In macroeconomics, there is something called hysteresis, this phenomenon of hysteresis, which is, when firms in the formal sector borrow credit, if they are not able to repay, then, their balance sheets come under stress, which basically then means maybe their productive assets could actually be, the bank could come and take those productive assets, go and sell it to somebody else. As a result, the firm is not able to produce. When you have many such firms who actually, cannot use their assets, you have at the macroeconomic level, productive capacity going down. That is what is called hysteresis. In other words, a negative shock actually, affects productive capacity in the economy, which then affects growth rate for a while. Actually, that's the concept of hysteresis. Which absolutely is fine for advanced economies, because almost the entire economy of theirs is, comprises of formal sector firms. But in India, that is not the case. We have a very large informal sector, where in informal sector, the production function that is used is far more driven by labor, not as much by capital, labor intensive, lot more labor intensive, right? So if you're labor intensive, your balance sheet may not have come under that much stress. So as soon as the economic activity starts picking up, you end up, so it's like if you're, for instance, a Kirana shop, right? Let's say, you have built up some inventory. Maybe you actually have told your supplier that, I will pay you back in a little bit of time, or maybe you might have reduced your inventory level because you didn't have the money to be able to keep such large inventory. But as soon as, people start, economic activities resume, you actually then your cash flows start going up, and then, you actually also have liquidity coming in, and in the interim, things like the ECGLS scheme, etc., have helped. So I'm giving an example of the kind of thinking that prevails. Now let me come to your question. In the advanced economies, there has been this tension between growth and inequality. Why? Because their growth rates actually have tapered off now. 2.5%, 3%. They actually are very happy if their growth, the economy grows at 3.5%. For instance, 4% this year is actually something that's a bonanza for them, right? So when you have, growth actually coming into becoming slow, then there isn't enough expansion in the pie. And also what has happened is people, who are in poverty, absolute poverty, actually absolute levels of poverty. I don't mean absolute in an adjective form, but absolute levels of poverty. That number is also very low. And therefore the focus really shifts on, what the Bill Gates of the world have, or the, Larry Ellisons, etc. have, versus the common person. In India, on the other hand, number one, we have the potential to grow at 7.5%, 8%. and thereby really expand the pie a lot. Resources that we generate from there, we can actually use it for welfare programs, and thereby lift a lot of people up above absolute poverty, absolute levels of poverty. So that is why the argument for inequality, which is this conflict that is made in the advanced economies, does not necessarily apply for India, and that's what the evidence also shows, that there is there is no sort of conflict in the Indian case. The reason, actually, the motivation for writing this is, I mean, when we have growth, right, you find a lot of people, again, not very rigorous thinking, saying, growth to theek hai, inequality ka kya hai? Inequality itna bad raha hai. Why are you not focusing on inequality? Growth to ho raha hai. Actually, it's just that this phenomenon of focusing on the glass half empty always, right? Jab growth ho raha hai, to theek hai, growth se, basically inequality ka kya ho raha hai? So the point that was, what we wanted to make was, remember the pandemic year, 7.3% decline did not impact people like us as much. It impacted people at the bottom of the pyramid far more. So that is the best illustration that growth is far, far more important for the less privileged sections than for, the more privileged sections. And that's the motivation, actually, saying that. So this chapter is the ammunition. I will certainly do it. 3-4 years later, when growth starts happening, you will start hearing those voices. Growth to ho raha hai, inequality ka kya hai? Then, just refer to this chapter saying growth hota hai, to inequality bhi kam hota hai, actually. And that is just, there is no conflict, there is convergence, basically, in this. That's the basic motivation for, So in other words, to really focus the debate on growth, and take it away from, from less rigorous thoughts on some of these aspects.
I believe Shubham Mahajan, you have a similar question, as in a sort of addendum question.
Yeah, ma'am. I wanted to ask, sir, but first of all, thank you for the session, and it's very insightful. Sir, even before liberalization of India in 1991, we saw that India was showcasing a stagnated growth rate of around 3.5% to 4%, and we can see again a slowdown in economy. And after 3 decades of liberalization, India still again needs to grow at a faster rate. So, according to you, what could be some of the policy that should be bought or implemented to achieve this?
Shubham, so
yes.
The policies that we have brought over the last 1.5-2 years, implementing those policies is basically what will deliver, high rates of growth. For instance, and I don't have the time to go into, specifics, the labor reforms we've done, the enterprise policy focused on private sector, opening up several sectors, including defense manufacturing, mining, some of the BPO aspects as well to enable online work, the change in the MSME definitions so that MSMEs can grow and thereby create jobs in the process and do not remain dwarfs. The PLI scheme focused on 10 champion sectors to actually enable exports. So these are all the reforms. Actually, many of those, the opening up of cryptography actually for entrepreneurship, digital in the digital area. It's a huge change. So all these reforms will really help increase the investment rate in the economy and also enable productivity improvements as well, and thereby really push GDP growth. So at this point in time, and you referred to 1991, I actually, and I've said it publicly as well, that I have no doubt that the reforms that we have done over the last year and a half are as seminal as those after 1991. And by the way, do remember, actually, like you guys are students now, I was a student when the 1991 reforms happened. I was doing engineering then. And I do remember that, that there was a lot of opposition to, reforms then, including from the ruling party, not only the ruling party, but cabinet ministers in the government itself were opposing, those reforms. Today, 30 years later, most people don't remember that, but I do remember it. People remember it romantically, saying, oh, reforms were done. But there was a lot of opposition. Why? Because those people were not able to see the benefits that were going to come through. A small section of people, including the protagonists of those reforms, had the foresight to see the benefits that they would bring. And that's what actually transpired. So in a similar way, I will say though that compared to then, now lot more people believe that these reforms actually will indeed enable growth. But there is a section that doubts it, and for that the best reference point is the benefits that came from liberalization, as you rightly pointed out, 3.5% growth before 91, and after that increasing on average 6.5 to 7%.
Right. So a lot of our
Last
audience.
question.
Okay, so last question. Okay, so a lot of our audience have questions related to COVID recovery, post-COVID era. So Shubham, why don't you just sort of ask a summary question to end this Q&A?
Thank you, ma'am. So good evening, sir. It has been a great session. So we are meeting at a time where COVID cases are rising again, and there are speculations of third wave. And in the economic survey, 2020-21 economic survey, the assumptions that were made that budget was in some ways the worst of it was behind us. And you projected a real GDP growth of around 11%. Now budget projected fiscal deficit of 6.8% for 2021 to 22. So after the second wave, do you think that those assumptions still hold?
Very much. So after the annual GDP numbers had come, I'd done a press conference where actually I had, this was in the end of May, where I had mentioned in the press conference my assessment of the impact of the second wave. It's publicly there as well that I had said that the economic impact of the second wave is not likely to be as large. If you look at the RBI's projection, they had projected at 10.5% for the year before the second wave, revised it to 9.5% after the second wave. The reason for that is simple, which is, unlike the first wave, the second wave was much shorter in duration. The pace of rise was very steep. The pace of fall has been equally steep as well. Of course, last couple of days there's been a little bit of increase, but if you look at the second wave, the pace of decline has been very, very steep. So overall, 6 to 8 weeks has basically been the duration of the second wave compared to about 6 months for the first wave. That's point number one. Second point is that the restrictions, have been placed at the state level this time, unlike the national level lockdown that happened in the first wave. And that happened because not only India, across the world, other countries also did national level lockdowns. The Oxford University's index actually shows that as well. This time now, all countries have learned how to deal with the, with the pandemic better, and so restrictions are placed at the state level. As a result, they were asynchronous in time, and they were heterogeneous in their intensity, which made a big difference compared to the first wave. Finally, that's the third aspect of the second wave. Essential, commodities, essential items were not impacted because that was something that states, allowed them to continue, those activities to happen, and interstate trade also did not, get impacted. And therefore, if you look at the data, I'll just use. We track almost 60 high frequency indicators, but I'll just pick one number, the GST, number, because GST is a reflector of consumption. It's, as you must have learned in economics, the revealed preference, GST is a revealed preference measure of consumption because it's a consumption based tax. So if you look at the GST number, in the month of April, it was 102 lakh crores. So at the end, for the month of April, for the month of May, it came out to be 92,000 crores. And yesterday, the number that has come for the month of, activities in the month of June, it has been 1,16,000 crores. So 102, 92, 116. Compare it to the period even before the pandemic itself, we were averaging about 95,000 crores. So clearly there's been a huge improvement. And so overall, I don't think the economic activities have been impacted as much. So we do think that the growth rate will be in that ballpark. We don't think, there are upside and negatives, and downside aspects to this, but overall the impact should not be very large. The 10.5% and the fiscal deficit number we will definitely meet, absolutely no doubt about that, because the revenue situation is looking much more comfortable. As for the your concerns of possibly a third wave, I think, while I'm not an epidemiologist, I actually do read the research on epidemiology very, very carefully. In fact, over the last year and a half, I've read far more papers in epidemiology than in economics. And what they suggest are, there are 3 points that we must take into account there. First, that if you are infected with the with the virus, and you take one shot, so the combination of the infection plus one shot gives you immunity equal to 2 doses, basically two shots. That's the first scientific finding. The second scientific finding is that if you are infected, the antibodies from the infection lasts 6 to 8 months. That's the second scientific finding that you have to. The third scientific finding is in terms of the level of vaccination and the seroprevalence in the country. So as of yesterday, or last week, we've done 47 crore people, 1 dose, 47 crores. So now take these 2 facts and put it together with the vaccination, 1 dose, and the seroprevalence itself. So what is the seroprevalence? The recent ICMR study show that 67% of the population already has antibodies. And because these have been acquired over the second wave, primarily, 6 months, you add 6 months to it, up until December, these antibodies are likely to stay. So even if you take June plus basically 6 months, so the immunity from the 70% of the population, close to 70% for overall, 70% for urban areas, is likely to stay up to December. 47 crores is a population that we've already provided 1 dose with. So if suppose, let's say that the combination of antibodies, which is due to just infection, and 1 dose, you combine that, let's say there's a 1-to-1 correspondence in that. In other words, every person who has basically got a vaccination is somebody who has gotten the infection before. Then in that case, you actually have about 67-70% of the population having immunity close to 70%, right? Close to 2 shots itself. It's possible that may not be the case, in which case the numbers may be a little lower. But even 1 shot actually gives you, immunity. So you can see that it's likely that the percentage of the population that has, protection against the infection is likely to be between 60 to 80-85%. That's the range, depending on the assumption that you make about what proportion of the infected population is the one that has basically gotten 1 dose. That's the, based on that you have to. So it seems like we actually might be close to herd immunity. Therefore, and if you this is the last fact that I want to point out. Actually, if you go and look at UK cases, for instance, in the 3rd wave versus the 2nd wave, in the first 50 days, the cases are almost identical, 3rd wave to the 2nd wave. I saw a chart where actually on the left side they had cases, on the right side they have deaths. In the 2nd wave, their deaths were proportional to the cases. In the 3rd wave, deaths have been minimal. Because they've vaccinated close to 60% of the population, 1 dose, they've given 60% or more. So deaths have been far less. So even if there is a 3rd wave where number of cases build up, the chances of it being very debilitating, I think, are lower. So that's my assessment. But let me end with the caveat that please listen to epidemiologists on this. This is not a license for you all to go and to have TGI. Thank God it's Friday parties where you actually don't have masks, and I'm not saying you should party. It's that this is a time to have fun as well. Work hard and play hard, but follow all the necessary COVID protocols. Take care. I don't want the director to come back and tell me your address actually made all my students not follow protocols, and we had actually cases. So in that, therefore, make sure you follow all the necessary precautions. But overall, at the macro level, I do think that even if there is a 3rd wave, may not be very very debilitating.
Thank you so much, sir, for this great, insightful session. The students wanted to close this session by extending a vote of thanks to you. And I would like to again thank on behalf of entire IIM Nagpur family. Thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate the gesture.
So, by this, we are reaching the end of the event. On behalf of our director, sir, PGP chairperson, all faculties and students of IIM Nagpur, I thank. Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, please go.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. I thank you, sir, for spending your time with us and sharing your valuable knowledge and advice to the students who will take inspiration from you to become the future pillars of our nation building. We all thank you, sir. We are all overwhelmed by your presence. And we look forward to having you in our future events, sir. And finally, thanks to our director, sir, faculty, staff, IT team, SAG president, and Nexus team for the support in handling the event successfully. Thanks to all for joining the event.
Thank you so much, sir. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you, Subramanian sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. And I apologize to the audience members whose questions we could not take. But I hope you realize that there was a time limit that we had the CA server. Thank you very much, Director, sir, for staying for so long. And thank you all my faculty colleagues, my staff, friends, and all my students. Thanks for making. I hope you had a great time with the Q&A session. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And hopefully we will see all of you in the next event that our Economics and Public Policy SIG has. Thank you so much. Have a great day.